America live in America with Dr. Jene Bramel and Jason Wood and Mitch Carl, DFS and Donuts for your DFS Sunday morning tips will be joining us in the second half of the show. Let's just jump right in because there's a lot to wade through here. Dr. Jene, explain to me how Chris Carson cannot practice for 3 weeks, and then with a Thursday night game coming up, there's some optimism that he will play, not going to play today. Or am I right to be baffled by this and we may not have Chris Carson, even though the news about him this morning is positive for Thursday, not today?
Yeah, I don't think they know yet. I think they're seeing progress. There's no sense really in putting him out there in any significant chance of re-aggravation through the week, but he's said to be running. They didn't put him on injured reserve. Again, I rely on that a lot more this year than in previous years. That doesn't mean that he's healthy. It doesn't mean that he's going to meet a 3 to 3.5 week timetable anyhow. But I think both of these teams, I'm a little bit surprised that Kenyon Drake is going to play today with a similar situation leading into Thursday night's game. So I think there's reason for optimism. They may have seen good progress through the week and just decided, you know what, we're not. Next week's game is too important for us to be risking Carson and or Hyde. I think they were trying to get both of those players in through the reconditioning phase of things, and then they'll reevaluate on Monday and see if he's able to practice by Wednesday. I wouldn't consider him any better than questionable at this point, but Pete Carroll was pretty reassuring. Well, I wouldn't say reassuring, but he was getting more optimistic about him on Sunday and Monday, right? Saying that, we're going to allow him to do a little bit more. He's a little bit closer to returning, and then just wasn't there in time. And that's the nature of these midfoot sprains, is they're difficult to heal, and it's a very important, high impact, high weight bearing area for a running back. It's just tough to recover from.
Real quick, touching on a couple more things before I go over to Woodrow. Rashad Penny, are you being clever if you're stashing Rashad Penny, or are you just wasting a spot?
I think all that has to do with probably mostly being clever. Well, I'm sorry, too clever. Let's put it that way. I think there's a chance that he comes back this week, but all of this is giving the team extra time to look at DJ Dallas and Travis Homer and where is Penny going to fit in that backfield. And it's still a difficult injury. So, maybe something breaks in week 15 or 16, but I haven't seen that much optimism out of Seattle to feel like that they are, that it's an impending return and an impendingly successful return.
And any lingering concern about Cooper Kupp's wrist or Darrell Henderson's quad coming out of the bye?
No, I don't think so. Sean McVay's been pretty apparent and straightforward and transparent that those guys are going to return, and both of them fully practiced toward the end of the week, so they should be good.
Okay, Woodrow, 6 afternoon games today. I guess this has to do with the Masters. They're trying to create a little TV space for the Masters, maybe. So,
yes, sir.
Actually, the main course is, it's not the dessert. It's the main course. One of those games, Seattle and the Rams. And, of course, Seattle has just been barnstorming through the league offensively. But the Rams, I don't want to say the Rams had their number because it's been high-scoring games, but the Rams could easily be 6-0 against them over the last 3 years, division rival, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of layers to this one. First, let's start with that Seattle backfield. And it's kind of like we're in week 17 for the rest of the year. Last week at running back looked like week 17. And this week isn't going to look that much different. So as we look through all of these unattractive options, what's your heat check of the unattractive running back options of DJ Dallas, Travis Homer, or any Rams back, basically any running back in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of default back to where we were a week or two ago. I mean, with both Hyde and Carson out again, I'm fine with going back to DJ Dallas. So he would be my play of the if you had to make a Seattle play, that would be my play. But above all that, I think to your point, I'd much prefer Darrell Henderson this week over any of the pick a Seahawk back. Number one, because obviously you'd much rather be playing against the Seattle defense than you would against the Rams defense. So I mean, I think Henderson's a borderline top 20 guy this week, actually. I would be more than happy to have him in my lineup. In fact, in the leagues that I have him on my roster, he is in my lineup pretty much across the board.
And what's interesting about that too is I guess it's a little bit of faith that there's some inertia here that because Henderson was getting the most touches and performing like he should, that we won't see any bye week adjustment for Cam Akers. This is kind of the do or die week of is Cam Akers even worth carrying on our roster? Jared Goff, Woodrow, are you going to get cute today with him? Because it's Seattle, man. Like everyone blows up against Seattle. But Jared Goff also showed an Achilles heel against pressure the last time we saw him. It's November Jared Goff. Whoa, that's your horror movie. And Seattle sacked Josh Allen 7 times last week, even though they put 44 on them. So is Jared Goff, is it a trap, or is it just follow this matchup here?
Listen, man, this is 2020 and it's week 10. If you have Jared Goff on your roster, and I have him on my roster in a couple places, of course you play him this week. Seattle is historically bad against the pass this year. Like, not just, they're not a great defense. They're historically bad. So, and by the way, it's weird because you don't usually see a team with that bad a pass defense also be statistically pretty good against the run. Like, sometimes the overall rush defense will look good because teams just don't run against them. But Seattle's, I think, only allowing 3.7 yards per rush to opposing defenses. So it's not even like a statistical trickery thing. They are defending the run pretty well. So I think the Rams, Sean McVay, I think Jared Goff is I guess I'm hot take this morning. Jared Goff's a top 8 quarterback this week. So I would play Goff over everybody but like Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, Russell, Herbert, Lamar Jackson, and maybe Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, I'd choose him over like Watson or Brady or Wentz or Breeze.
Yeah, and with Rodgers and Watson and Roethlisberger, there might be some wind. What about Jared Goff against Carson Wentz? The old draft battle redo, Jason.
Yeah, no, I mean I would play Goff over Wentz this week, but I think Wentz at New York with I was going to say arguably, but inarguably the best receiving core he's had in a season and a half with everybody getting healthy again outside of Zach Ertz is certainly also a very viable play this week and one that if you're in the situation where you're playing Wentz because he's your best option anyway, you should feel pretty good. If there's a week to feel good about it of late, it's probably this week.
Last one, Goff or Tom Brady and the Bucs waiting to get their plane to Charlotte?
Yeah, I mean, again, Goff for me, but not because I think Brady's an avoid, but I don't know, and I don't know if I didn't have a chance to listen to the Audible this week, but I don't know like what your guys' postscript was on what we saw of Brady against the Saints. Like that was one of the more shocking things I've seen in a while.
Yeah.
In the sense that they had their cadre back and Antonio Brown was there and we had built up this narrative. So I don't know what to make of Brady. I mean, he's on pace for 40 touchdown passes this year. Like statistically, again, as we talked about last week, he's statistically having a very good season, but I don't know what to make. And then I saw a blurb that the Bucs are benching Ryan Jensen. Well, they're playing him at guard until Ali Marpet's back, but he's certainly going to be benched once Marpet comes back because Marpet's an All-Pro. In favor of A.Q. Shipley, who has been on the bench all year and was a full-time starter with the Cardinals last year, but a subpar, below league average full-time starter. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if Brady's frustrated with Jensen and line calls. Like something's clearly amiss, right? This feels like Brady not necessarily having a tantrum, but saying, listen, you guys brought me in. I want things my way, and I don't like this Jensen guy. Yeah. So I don't know. Tampa Bay could go either way the second half of the season. I thought I had a good peg on them, right, having the momentum and riding into one of the top seeds. But now I'm certainly less confident after what we saw the Saints.
It's seriously, Woodrow, like doing what we do because we're always following trend lines and things like that. There was no trend line or no indicator of what we were going to see last week. None at all. Mm-hmm. Was it an anomaly or a sign of what's to come? Of course, in my narrative street driven mind, I just hope this is the Antonio Brown curse descending on the Bucs, and we're watching it manifest in all of its forms. Dr. Gene, we will see Kenyon Drake manifest probably on the field. I think we've seen high ankle sprain. Like you said, they play on Thursday. What else can you shed light again? Because, hey, he might be one of the more attractive running back options in this slate.
Yeah, it's a little surprising to me. I don't think there's much question that it was a high ankle sprain based on what the reports were. Video wasn't entirely conclusive, but there was enough evidence there not to doubt what the reports were. And the initial reports were expect injured reserve and potentially as long as a 4 to 6 week absence, which makes you think that somewhere in the mid-grade injury. And those things are usually fairly accurate between the MRI and your exam the next day. So I was pretty surprised to see him recover as quickly as he has, do as much as he did coming out of the bye. Still thought with a Thursday night game on tap against Seattle, very important game for the Cardinals, that they'd give him the benefit of a little bit extra rehab time, especially with Chase Edmonds playing as well. So to hear Ian Rappaport, I think, and possibly even Adam Schefter, I can't remember if it was both or just one of them, say this morning that things were positive for him to play and that they were hopeful and expecting that, they weren't going to see anything during pregame warmups and he was going to be able to go, after Cliff Kingsbury said he's not going to play unless he can do everything that he's able to do to full strength. So he just didn't expect that to be the case. I'm a little bit leery. I don't know that this is going to be a surprising inactive, but I don't think that we're going to see a 70-30 split in Drake's favor. I think we're still likely to see a fair amount of Edmonds. There is some risk of aggravation today. Certainly Drake could have a great game because he's a nice player and the Arizona offense is strong, but I would not discount this being very much of a split backfield today, and even something that breaks in favor of Edmonds, even without any setbacks or game script issues.
Okay, Woodrow. I mean, it isn't that interesting to talk. I guess we could start. It's funny. We actually have like a big board behind me where we rank all the unattractive running back options. But just roughly, since we've already established, say Henderson the best out of the Seattle Rams game, would Drake or Edmonds, and let's include the Buffalo backs, just since we're talking about this game. I think Zach Moss would probably be the most attractive of any of these guys, just because we have some clarity about his background. I mean, his goal line role and this game being a high-scoring game. What about Drake and Edmonds? Or what about for the folks out there that have to choose between Drake and Edmonds today and what should be a shootout?
Yeah, and before I answer the question, let me preface, and you set it up right, which is that this is just the most marginal of calls, right? Like, I don't have a lot of conviction about this because how could we? But I like Edmonds above both of the Buffalo backs and above Drake this week, just because Drake is coming back, as Gene said, it presumably they wouldn't bring him back if he wasn't fully healthy. But I don't know that we were feeling that great about Drake before he got hurt. He's playing on a 1-year deal. It just feels like, again, if we're talking about rational coaching, rational personnel management, I'd want to see if Edmonds can handle the load because you can commit to him for a couple of years at least. So I'm leaning towards Edmonds, but admittedly, it's not like I'm feeling great about it. I could totally see it going the other way. In terms of Buffalo, I would agree with you on the one point, which is that I very much prefer Zach Moss to Devin Singletary. Moss has been one of the nicer surprises of the season, I think, just in the sense that I know in terms of draft pedigree, some viewed him as just kind of a plotter that maybe could have a role as a short yardage back. And I think he's been a much better player than that, especially watching him play a few times. I mean, he certainly looked better than I expected him to look in the NFL environment. But I don't think either Buffalo back are top 20 guys this week, at least in terms of how I have them ranked. And Edmonds is in my top 15, so he'd be the pick.
And I just did this in the chat room, Woodrow. The way I express something that I'm expressing a lot about running backs this week is I'll add, when someone asks a start-sit question, I'll add an "and pray" at the end. So, I mean, that's basically a lot of running back choices this week. Go ahead and play Chase Edmonds and pray. Prayers answered by Christian Kirk for the last 3 games. I don't know, outside of Devontae Adams, if there's anybody hotter than Christian Kirk. Does that mean that you contort to get him in your lineup this week? Do you treat him like a top 10 wide receiver in this game, with Tre'Davious White likely resuming that great rivalry with DeAndre Hopkins?
Sure. This season has been of the 20-ish or so we've all been doing this. This is probably the season most defined by start the hot hand and, like you said, hope that the momentum continues into that week, right? Listen, I wasn't that excited about Christian Kirk coming into the season after they acquired Hopkins. I thought he'd relegated to like a tertiary role, meaning that he would be the number 2, but would almost split snaps and targets with Fitzgerald. Obviously, that was wrong. He's been playing lights out, like you said, so I think you have to feel good about him. There's no reason to think suddenly he's going to drop back off the cliff. I think the bigger question is, we all continue to slot DeAndre Hopkins into our top 5 every week in terms of our projections, and has Kirk taken the top 5 or at least the top 3 upside off of Hopkins in most weeks? That's I think a more interesting question for people who are kind of counting on Hopkins to carry the baton for them. I think you can definitely like Kirk for sure. He's been playing really well and he's looked the part. It hasn't been fluky. So,
and it's Kyler Murray as a passer. Mm-hmm. Really evolving. His running has been tremendous, and I still think that straight up, especially in PPR league, you have to put Hopkins ahead of Kirk. However,
sure. Yeah.
and last week seemed disappointing. Now remember that was Xavier Howard. Beware if you have Mike Williams this week. But Hopkins also drew 4 pass interference penalties in that game.
Mhm.
So I think that his actual line with the pass interference would have been 7 for 99. Not that we assume those are all completions, but I'll ask you this, Dr. Gene, because you're usually good at settling controversial issues. What's your first blush on the idea of some way, and even for the NFL, not just fantasy, some sort of credit for the quarterback or wide receiver when they draw a pass interference penalty?
I think that's reasonable. Some of those penalties are disputed, but I think that generally speaking, the wide receiver has a ton of a role in acquiring those yards for the team. And even if it's not a caught pass, it's either because the defensive player, it's deemed that there would have been able to make a play on the ball if the defensive player hadn't interfered. So I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, and while we're at it, let's go ahead and take yards away for penalties that just all the yards gained and earned. But I saw a little bit of consternation about Hopkins not getting credit for that. But that's part of the reason that Hopkins maybe fell off a bit last week. What about John Brown? Because unlike Christian Kirk, it's not a 3-week trend coming in. It's just 1 week. But wow, what a 1-week trend for Brown, for Josh Allen. I don't think those two things are unrelated. Do you use that 1 week? Because again, Arizona's secondary, this is not. And Gene, real quick, Budda Baker, Drake Kirkpatrick, both expected to play in this one?
Yeah, that seems to be the case. A little bit more optimistic about Baker, but Kirkpatrick should be there too.
Yeah, again, one of these 6 games in that afternoon slate. What about John Brown? Woodrow, your optimism level for him?
Excuse me. John Brown being back is I'm more optimistic about what John Brown being back means for Josh Allen than I am what it means for Josh Brown, for John Brown. Mm-hmm. So I think that for Brown, I view him as a wide receiver 3 this week. Excuse me. It's a neutral matchup. Like you said, he looked good. But I don't think he's going to have the consistent target share that I'm going to feel comfortable thinking he's giving me a really important boost into my second half of the season push. But what he does do is it's clear that Allen loves him. It's clear that he is a legitimate extra threat on the outside, which changes the fabric of the way that defenses can scheme against Stephon Diggs and the running game. So I think it's great news for the Bills. It's great news for Josh Allen, who had started off MVP hot, right, and then had a bit of a lull, and now is back to being MVP hot. And I suspect that those who have Josh Allen will likely make their fantasy playoffs because he's been a beast. And I just think as long as Brown is healthy, that's really good for him. So huge news for Allen, but mediocre for me on Brown, the player. I think wide receiver 3, kind of in the top 20 if you're really optimistic, and maybe down to 30. I think I have him 27th this week.
Yeah, big in that wide receiver 3 flex range. Break ties in favor of John Brown.
Yeah.
This is a game, and we'll talk a little more when Mitch shows up about this game for DFS, but this is a game that's going to create a lot of overachievers. I like that you mentioned the fantasy playoffs and Josh Allen, Jason, because the fantasy playoffs for Josh Allen, Pittsburgh, at Denver, at New England. So, it's going to test your mettle depending on your other quarterback. That's going to be a tremendous game. Another exciting game, I mentioned this, free association, Miami and the Chargers makes me think of Kellen Winslow. It's like the first vivid football memory that I have. One of the greatest games. Gene, I know you bristle at the idea of injury prone. I use that term, injury inertia, for Matt Breida. When he's injured, he tends to stay injured. We're going to see him today.
Injury prone is different than slow to recover from injury and soft tissue injuries, and I think that's a reasonable metric to consider, where certain players just seem to have either a higher risk of a higher grade soft tissue injury, or they're just a little bit slower to recover for whatever reason. And no, I don't think Breida is going to play today. There seems to be some pretty good optimism that'll be back next week, but this week was a reconditioning week for him. Wasn't quite ready to go, and without any setbacks through the first part of practices next week, he should play next week.
So, Jason, we've already talked about Buffalo backs, Arizona backs, Seattle backs, Rams backs. Now we're just going to vomit all the running backs from this game onto your considerations here of the unattractive. It's like the opposite of a beauty pageant, right? We're playing pin the tail on the donkey. We're going to spin you around. Anybody from Miami or the Chargers We might even just say not even play today, but even worth picking up to roster and see what happens in this game.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards the latter perspective, which is that, and I actually did this in our staff league in Fessel because it's been that kind of season. I actually preemptively picked up DeAndre Washington. And now listen, I don't think anyone, unless you're in an absolute dire situation, should feel compelled to put DeAndre Washington into your lineup this week because he could be inactive. He could have no touches. That we don't know. But I just thought that was an interesting little roster move that they made. It did kind of say to me they're still not totally satisfied with what they have healthy. And I mean, Jordan Howard's mystifying to me. I wasn't advocating people draft Jordan Howard this preseason just because I thought it would be a committee and he would be the less exciting or have a lower upside of the committee. Obviously, we were all wrong because the person owned was Myles Gaskin, who was not part of that committee in our narrative. But man, like, what is going on? I mean, did the guy kick Brian Flores' like dog? Because if not this week, then what? Right? Like, why not? They should just release him and make him a street free agent. If so, listen. If you're desperate and you have bye weeks and injury weeks could I see a narrative where you put Jordan Howard in this week and just, like you said, and pray that you get 40, 50 yards and a touchdown? Yeah, and I don't think that's unreasonable. That's certainly in the realm of outcomes in the probability tree. But wow, it's going to be tough to feel great when you're hitting submit lineup if you have a Dolphins running back in your lineup.
And Nerf gun to your head, Woodrow. Balaj, Pope, or Kelly?
Well, just because Pope is still questionable, I think he's going to play, right? But it seems like he's banged up, and given his pedigree, I don't know it's not like some stud that you say, oh, if he's in there, he's good to go. So I can't go with Pope. What a year. I mean, Balaj, I guess, right? I mean, based on what we saw, he came off the street and I think at least was equal or slightly outsnapped Kelly. So
yeah,
I guess Balaj, but wow, it's a struggle. The struggle is very, very real.
It's week
Justin
17.
Herbert. Justin Herbert's going to lead.
Yeah, exactly. Real quick, since you brought up Herbert, because we've all aired our Herbert takes, and that's been one of the most wonderful stories of the season, just from a football fan standpoint to watch. What do we think of Tua so far? And without Preston Williams, are you trusting Devontae Parker? Is it a Mike Gesicki game? What do we think of the Miami passing game led by Tua?
Tua is very much still an incomplete, right? 1.5 games effectively, because I call that first game a half game based on how little they had to ask him to do. It's a neutral matchup. The Chargers defense, I think, has been a lot better than we thought it would be, knowing the marquee players that have been out for all or most of the season. But they're certainly not a defense that's stifling. Is there such a thing as a stifling NFL defense these days? I don't know that there is. So, again, I wish I could give you a really definitive take here. I think Tua has looked okay, but I also don't think he's been put in a position to be challenged or win games yet. Obviously, again, it's not even 2 whole games, so we'll have to see. I wouldn't feel great. I mean, if you're asking me what I don't feel great about having him in lineups this week. I think he's not in my top 20, so I
know.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And this offense is going to be a safe offense. He made a lot of strides last week, and it's going to be fun to watch him. I will say this. I've said this a bunch of times in the last week or two. For the first time that I can remember, I look around the NFL and I feel like, wow, we have an abundance of exciting young quarterbacks, a variety of talents and abilities to watch. And every week, this week we're going to get Josh Allen against Kyler Murray. We're going to get Tua against Herbert. And now we have a lot of that to look forward to. Before we let Woodrow gush about the new look Eagles offense he alluded to, Gene, any hesitation? Because, we saw, it's interesting, and it shows the nature of these different injuries. Because Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon, Chris Carson, we were watching all these guys with semi-indefinite absences, but not going on IR. And not only did we not see Joe Mixon and Chris Carson return to practice this week, they're not going to play. We did see Miles Sanders return to practice. We are going to see him return to the field. Should we have any pause about playing him today?
No. Miles Sanders, not at all. It looks like he's fully healthy, full recovery in practice. He sounds optimistic. Doug Peterson said the Eagles were going to give him as many touches as he could handle. That offense is getting healthier by the day. We should have Dallas Goedert and Jalen Reagor fully assimilated into the offense and now back at game condition and speed. The offensive line is getting a little bit healthier. Lane Johnson is doing a little bit better. One of their guards is likely to come back soon. I'm not sure if that's actually happening this week or not. Alshon Jeffrey's probably not going to play a significant role, but isn't going to hurt. And I don't think that hurts Miles Sanders at all. More mouths to feed does not bother his upside necessarily, because rather than, his ceiling being in the 12 to 18 touch range, we might see it be 15 to 22, even with Boston Scott there. So no worries on Sanders for me.
Woodrow, we're playing each other this week. I did not trade for Miles Sanders just so I could use him against you. I'm not that hard. We're jockeying for playoff position here. Miles Sanders is easy. I mean, if you have Miles Sanders, you're playing him. What about Dallas Goedert? What about Jalen Reagor? What about? I know that this is going to be divided by a healthy sense of, I don't want to say neuroses. That's more Steelers fans. I don't know what we would call it for Eagles fans. But I know that you're not just going to say they're going to score 50 points. It's going to be amazing because you're going to be realistic about your team. What are realistic expectations for Reagor, Goddard, Fulgham against James Bradbury? Just this offense, is it going to look like the offense we hoped we were going to see this year?
It better. No, I mean, listen, I'm being trite, but first of all, as we said earlier, the clear takeaway here is that Wentz has no more excuses, right? Yes, the offensive line is still not at all what we thought or expected it to be, but it is rounding into shape. There has been enough time now where they've been building some cohesion. So while the line is still not the A+ that we thought it would be, it's certainly a much less risky proposition to this whole equation than it was, say, a month ago. And I think Gene's right. I think Alshon Jeffrey, the good news is he's legit healthy. He actually practiced in full 100% healthy, which is the first time he's been healthy in a long, long time. The question I think a lot of us have to ask is that Travis Fulgham is likely in everybody's lineup if you have him. And does Fulham's snap count or role somehow become diminished by Jeffrey being back? I'd like to think not, because even though Jeffrey is the proven veteran with the big contract, he also, before he got hurt, was chirping about Wentz. And by the way, if you go back and read the comments that were attributed to him, was he wrong? He probably wasn't wrong, but certainly it was perceived that he was a naysayer and that the Eagles absolutely would have traded him or cut him were it not for a pretty big cap hit. So I just think the way Fulham's playing, my supposition is that Fulgham and Reagor and Goddard are the centerpieces of this, along with Miles Sanders, who's plenty capable as a receiver. But it's still very exciting with the idea of having Jeffrey in as that third receiver in 3 receiver sets. So I think you start your Eagles this week. Reagor hasn't done enough yet where you can feel confident saying, oh, he's for sure a play. I think Rager's like a what the heck flex top 30, top 40 type of guy this week. But I think with another good week or two, he could certainly move into a range where you feel a little more confident putting him in there. But I think that absolutely Goddard should be in most people's starting lineups, given the state of tight end. As you said, Miles Sanders instantly back being a top 10 player in redraft, whether it be PPR or not. And I think for me, I give Fulham the benefit of the doubt until we see evidence that somehow his role's been diminished.
Yeah, folks, if you have any pause about playing Dallas Goedert, Richard Rodgers, the great Richard Rodgers, had 6 for 85 against the Giants 3 weeks ago, and this is a statement game for the Eagles. I think the Eagles want to show that they're clearly the best team in the division, and they're also a team that can make some noise in the playoffs. This is that yardstick, and we'll see. It could be a good placebo for them as they're going to face tougher teams in the playoffs if they can bring home this division. Gene, no playoffs for the Lions this year. And again, I can't remember. I think I was on with Mike Shope in Buffalo, and we were talking about why is it in every Lions season the best outcome for the fans is that they just sweep the deck, that everyone gets fired. What's a good season for the Lions? A season where everyone gets fired at the end of it. But at least one good thing Bob Quinn did is drafting TJ Hockenson. It doesn't look like that was a misfire in the top 10, but he does have a toe issue coming to this one. It's been a relatively healthy and consistent season for him. Is this where it all starts to come unraveled? What's the outlook for Hockenson today, Gene?
I don't think so. It sounds like it's a fairly optimistic situation. Last week he was on the injury report, albeit fully practiced Thursday and Friday, and then not listed on the game status report, and had a career day. And has been trending upward for the last month or so. So it's a little bit disconcerting to see a Thursday DNP after not being listed on the injury report on Wednesday. Hard to know if he just felt a little bit of soreness on Wednesday, if they wanted to get him some treatment. Back to a little bit of practice on Friday. Matt Patricia called him tough, willing to play through anything. We're going to list him how we list him, all that sort of stuff, which to me sounds like, he's there on the injury report, but we're not too concerned about him. And that may just be me being colored by last week's performance despite the toe injury. But this is not not a new condition, did not seem to be in any way aggravated during last week's game. So I'm anticipating his usual snaps and targets today, and hopefully there wasn't anything that happened during practice on Wednesday that wasn't reported that we find out about later.
Jason, it's 2020, so you knew that Alex Smith was going to end up being a starting quarterback again. And actually, unlike the first time he was on the field, he didn't look like a baby fawn on a frozen pond. He looked viable out there. He almost brought his team back. What about this week? It's the Lions, maybe the worst defense in the league the last 2 games. So, say like a Logan Thomas or Antonio Gibson. Of course, you're going to play him in redraft leagues, but just the Washington offense under the stewardship of Alex Smith in this game that will always remind me that Barry Sanders should have made a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree that we want Alex Smith to tear it up, right? I mean, I want to see Alex Smith absolutely light up the Lions today, because that would be such an amazing exclamation point on one of the most improbable comebacks of all time. So I'm really rooting for that to happen, even though that Washington is a division rival. Like I'm definitely this week rooting for Alex Smith to tear it up. I think the issue I have, Sig, and I'm actually surprised. I wanted to push this back to you, is that I know you and Dodds both have McLaurin in your top 5 this week at the position, and I have an incredible number of Terry McLaurin shares. And I have to admit, there were some calls with like top 20, 25 other receivers that I was like, maybe I'll keep McLaurin on the bench this week, see what Alex Smith, because Alex Smith did throw in 3 interceptions and don't know about the offensive line. And then I saw you and Dodds both have like unyielding confidence, and he's a must play. And I'm thinking, oh, wow. I mean, I hope you're right, but I didn't see it that way. So I don't feel great about any Washington individual player this week. I think you're correct in saying Gibson and frankly McKissick in PPR, you're probably playing them. I mean, you probably were playing them. And actually, it's funny. Okay, let me rephrase that. I actually feel pretty good about McKissick because I do think, regardless of how Alex Smith plays overall, he's always been fond of the running back dump off. So, and I think with his state of his leg and that offensive line and him being jittery, I think McKissick could catch 8 to 10 balls this week. So I feel good about him, and Gibson's played well enough. Surprising to me, based on my preseason views of him, by the way, that you probably play both of those guys. I understand that McLaurin's probably in your lineup because you likely don't have a materially better option at this point. But I am a little more nervous about McLaurin than you guys seem to be. So maybe why you feel so confident about McLaurin?
Well, partially so last week I thought having James Bradbury out there might have discouraged Alex Smith from throwing to McLaurin. A lot of this is just a chip on the Lions continuing to lion.
Sure,
because
that makes sense. Yeah.
Last week, Kirk Cousins threw 20 passes. He only completed 13 of them. 220 and 3 touchdowns on 20 pass attempts. Phillip Rivers threw 3 touchdowns against them in week 8. Phillip Rivers. So I just feel like, and you know that it's going to be there, but I actually think you're absolutely right about J.D. McKissick, and probably Sharp in the trade market this week with running back, a Civil War battlefield, basically. Trading for J.D. McKissick in a PPR league, he could easily end up being a strong running back too. Was it Jalen Richard one year, not that long ago, that every week was catching 5, 6, 7 passes, and we were slow to move him up in the rankings and slow just to adjust to, we've seen James White do it. We've seen Tariq Cohen at different times. It doesn't necessarily last for a whole season. Obviously there's the ideals, guys like Austin Eckler and Christian McCaffrey. J.D. McKissick, it may not be pretty, it may not seem fair, but we could see in the second half of the season him rank in the top 12 or 15 in PPR running back rankings. So I think that's an excellent call, excellent player to point out here as one of the least essential games coming up this week. Coming up tonight, Gene, maybe not an essential game, certainly not the game that they had hoped for when they scheduled this one on a Sunday night. Maybe they sort of flexed it out, but we're watching that New England backfield and Damian Harris. What's the outlook for Harris playing tonight and playing well?
I think it's pretty good. I always go back to, you can't, New England probably lists 95% of their players as questionable.
17 players this week, something like that.
And some of them, and probably well over half of them are going to play. I don't have the exact numbers. I used to run these numbers, but I don't have them in front of me. But this year, and sometimes you just don't know. If it's a new injury or if it's a chronic situation they've already missed a week with, it can be a difficult read. In Harris's case, the two things that I like to go by are the Patriots allowing them to talk to the media, which they won't do if there's much chance that they're not going to play? And two, are the writers giving you any of their usual indications? And there's 6 or 7 of them there, and each one of them in their own way tell you when they know something without telling you. And so you can usually get a sense. Now, there was a little bit of some concern from the beat writers, I'd say, on Wednesday because the chest injury looked painful on the field, and it was new in addition to the ankle. But Harris has been talking to the media all week, saying good things on Friday, like he understands the importance of availability. He wants to be there for his teammates. I don't think that happens if he was going to be inactive for sure. So maybe there's a little bit of a game time decision component to this, but I would anticipate that he's going to play. I think he's likely to see, whatever role he's been seeing. And again, we know what that means in New England, but somewhere on the order of 15 to 25 snaps and 10 to 15 touches, because when he's in the game, they're going to give him the ball. That's what they've shown. Game script's a little bit different than the last couple of weeks when Buffalo with a win game and so on and so forth. So, there is some risk here, but I'm expecting him to be active, and I think he's going to be available for 15 carries if that's what they ask him to do.
Looking at this game tonight, let's get another one. Test your mettle, Woodrow. Mark Andrews. There's a lot of people saying, is it time to bench Mark Andrews? You're watching, who knows, outscore him on your bench, and you're getting tired of it. New England's not a great matchup for tight ends, but Andrews always carries that multi-touchdown upside. I looked it up last year when these two teams played. 9 catches by Baltimore tight ends. Now 5 of them in the touchdown went to Nick Boyle. They had Hayden Hurst on the roster still then too. So how cute do you get with your Mark Andrews decisions this week?
Long dark tea time of the soul, Sig.
Yes.
Listen, the tight end position is a debacle. It is a debacle, right? Eric Ebron and Mike Gesicki have cases to be made for top 5.
Jimmy Graham.
Yeah. So, I think that answers your question. I think we need to break this out into 2 constituent parts. It is both true that Mark Andrews has been significantly disappointing, particularly in the last month, relative to expectations, enough that you, if you have him in your lineup, are disappointed and it's hurt you, for sure. But that is mutually exclusive from saying that Mark Andrews should be benched. Because I have a hard time looking at this slate this week and not seeing that Mark Andrews has as good a chance, if not better, of being a top 3 to 5 producer this position. Are you really going to feel better about putting Gronk or Austin Hooper or Ebron or Logan Thomas out there or Gerald Everett? It's tough out there, right? So if you don't have Waller, if you don't have Hockenson, and is there anyone else you for sure feel better than Andrews? Because Kelsey's on the bye, right? Dallas Goedert, I like. I would start Dallas Goedert, by the way, over Mark Andrews if I had that option. But you probably don't have that option, or at least very few people do. And it's not like Goddard's done anything yet. We're betting on Goedert to round into form. It's tough, man. So no, I don't think there's many people that can confidently or logically bench Mark Andrews. But I get the frustration.
Yeah, it's Waller, Hockenson, and like you said, Goddard, and then at that point you're getting cute. Now that being said, there's theoretical upside for a lot of plays out there. Gesicki we keep bringing up, and by the way, my deep play. Last week I had it. This week we'll see potentially again if Jakeem Grant becomes a big part of the Miami pass offense.
So much.
Yeah, what's that?
I said, God, you love Jakeem Grant.
I like the little guy. I think it's just any pint-sized player. That's why I was one of the few people still on Naeem Hines Island whenever he had.
By the way, you're a football nerd. Right before we logged on to do the show, I Googled, where is Timmy Chang now? Speaking of little guys.
Right. Graham Harrell, I think, has a good future in coaching.
Well, he's okay. Well, Graham Harrell is the coordinator at a major program. Timmy Chang, for those wondering, is in his 3rd year as the tight ends coach at the University of Nevada.
Oh, well,
so, there you go.
From humble starts. Since we had someone,
I threw you off your game with the Timmy Chang talk. I threw you off.
Why? Colt, where's Colt Brennan? Anyone?
Right. Yeah.
Anyone heard? I think he waited on me at Applebee's last night. We had a question about DJ Moore in the chat room. Jack Corby. Thanks everyone for showing up and joining us. We love spending Sunday mornings with you. We appreciate everyone. Have we talked about DJ Moore at all today? Which we have not. It's kind of like the Mark Andrews question. And also we can look at Curtis Samuel or DJ Moore, or is this one of those situations where you think people will be rewarded for being steady and not being thrown off by the last 2 weeks of disappointment from DJ Moore?
Yeah, I think I've succumbed to the DJ Moore frustration a bit more than I have the Mark Andrews, because unlike tight end, there are almost an embarrassing number of receivers that you can make a case for. Like, I look at the list of receivers and I look at the top 50 on our site this week, and I mean, I can make a positive case legitimately for almost all of them to have a big week. So I think there is a case of supply demand, and at the tight end position, there's just no supply. There's no viable alternative supply. In the case of DJ Moore, I think there's absolutely, in most cases, if you have more on your roster, you have other receivers that you're choosing from that have as good, if not better, opportunity sets this week. So I wouldn't be clamoring to put more into my lineup. I think it's totally justifiable, but playing against Tampa Bay, I think Anderson has certainly cemented himself as the play there. I'm not a big Curtis Samuel guy either. I mean, I know he gets a few carries a game and he's had some pretty big plays, but I just don't like betting on players who rely on big plays versus volume. So I still would put Moore as the number 2 option there. And they don't really have a tight end. And Christian McCaffrey's hurt. So he should get targets. I mean, he should get targets unless Tampa Bay absolutely just takes out their frustration on Carolina this week for what happened to them against the Saints last week. But no, Moore I think is like 33rd on my PPR rankings this week.
Right.
So yeah,
nowhere near we had before. By the way, I feel terrible, and I appreciate. This is why it's great to have a great large crowd. Joe Warriors, and I think the Warriors has to do with.
Oh jeez,
I know. I feel horrible. I feel really bad. Colt Brennan 10 years ago.
All right. Well, we obviously.
I know. I feel terrible. I'll just say Colt Brennan had a traumatic brain injury in a car accident like 10 years ago. So I am the person that is.
I guess I'm beating you this week in our head.
Yeah, exactly. All the karma, all the bad karma here. We're gonna have Mitch Carl here to join us for the last 15 minutes or so to talk some DFS. Gene, I just want to get your take here. I think we've touched on all the major injury situations. So I just want to get your take here from a football intuition standpoint, since we brought it up a few times about this Tampa Bay New Orleans game last week. Are you more inclined to view this as it's a week-to-week game, it's motions, a lot of things, and it's not going to make me greatly change how I view Tampa or New Orleans, or are you open to the idea that this could be a sign that the direction of these teams could change in the second half of the season after such a stunning game last week?
No, I think this is, to me, it just felt like it was shocking to see New Orleans play as well as they have. But New Orleans has gotten Michael Thomas back. It's the healthiest their offense has been arguably in 18 months, all the way through last year when Alvin Kamara really wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. I think they're starting to see some cohesion with an offensive line that's been banged up a little bit. And that defense, the secondary is a strong secondary, and they've got some pass rushers there. So that's not it's not a 500 team there. And we always see year after year divisional opponents understand each other a little bit better. Now, things are a little bit different, obviously, in Tampa Bay this year with Tom Brady and what have you. But the narrative that Drew Brees' arm is absolutely terrible. The narrative that Bruce Arians and Tom Brady have made this offense unstoppable is difficult. And you've seen Mike Evans fighting through injury, Chris Godwin dealing with a hand situation. That rushing offense may not be as strong as it looked at different points. And when a team like that falls behind quickly 2 to 3 touchdowns and becomes one-dimensional, it's that much easier to play against. So I don't think that we draw too much from this, other than maybe we've been underrating New Orleans a little bit. And good teams sometimes fall behind and become one-dimensional and show that they're not as strong as they may have been another time. So we'll see how this progresses. I wouldn't read super much into it, but certainly interesting to see. That's true.
It was maybe the greatest half of football the Saints have ever played. And they actually, on the Wednesday night, like prime time on the Fox affiliate here in New Orleans, they just played the game again. It's like, we're going to show the game, everybody, and enjoy this, because it was so stunning. As we're waiting for Mitch, I was saving this one for Mitch to show up, but I'll ask you, Woodrow, as a lead into it. Wind in Green Bay, Jacksonville, Green Bay. Wind in Cleveland, Houston, Cleveland. Wind in Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh. And tomorrow night, wind in Chicago, it looks like, Minnesota and Chicago. What's your process here? Are you reviewing lineups, or if you're doing rankings, are there certain types of players or individual names that come to mind? Or are you more inclined to err on the side of not reacting than overreacting as we get into this as a weekly consideration almost when we get into November and December?
I wish we had Adam Harstad here because I feel like he would have some kind of multivariate study he could point to. But my understanding is we often get over concerned about wind conditions, and I think it's like. And again, please, if you're all listening, listen. I could be totally wrong, but I feel like it's like 22 miles an hour is the only, and above is like when you really, really need to be serious about it. I mean, I think that the obvious, like, what do you pay me for answer is get excited about the running games, right? And certainly those matchups also lend for that, right? So it's not like I need to tell anybody that you should be playing Aaron Jones this week or anything like that. So now what's interesting with the Browns is because of that win situation and Baker Mayfield being a little nicked up and wasn't sure until, well, I mean, I guess it was, everyone expected him to play, but it was still theoretically up in the air midweek. And then you have the return of Nick Chubb, which I can't believe we've gone 45 minutes, Sig, without you talking about.
Yeah.
But we have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt now in the backfield together in what should be a game that they can and will define by running the ball. And I'm pretty excited to see what they do with Chubb coming out. I mean, it's a great matchup,
right,
on multiple levels. So I personally already have Chubb ahead of Hunt again in my pecking order. Like if I happen to have them both or was making a choice, I would choose Chubb. I'm not sure that's the consensus view. But yeah, I think so. For me, I'm not this week. I'm not too concerned about the wind conditions. It's just essentially like a tiebreaker if you really do have two toss-up guys that you like roughly the same.
Yeah, and look, my take real quick before, and welcome Mitch Carl, DFS Donuts. I went and got the donuts this morning. I got tired of waiting around. Buttermilk Drop, by the way, if you're ever in New Orleans, Buttermilk Drop is the answer for all of your breakfast needs, all of your DFS needs, rise or fall. So real quick, my take here is, don't I wouldn't worry as much about Aaron Rodgers because he just played in these conditions recently. I would worry who you playing from the Cleveland passing game anyway. Maybe looking tomorrow night, someone like Darnell Mooney. But I agree with Jason's basic take here that it may make you look back to the running games. How is the wind going to influence our DFS lineups today, Mitch?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm not totally in on believing in the wind being a huge impactor unless the wind kind of gets up there around like sustained 25-ish miles per hour. I'm no weatherman. I just follow what I know other smart weathermen tell me that is important for throwing the football. And what I've heard over the years is right around that 25 mile per hour marker, if it's sustained, becomes slightly an issue. It matters specifically to each stadium. Things like crosswind, things like that can make it more inaccurate. Not so much. We're never really worried about them being able to get the ball down the field. That's not like a thing so much anymore. These guys are so strong, but it's the accuracy that becomes the issue. And then you see the field kind of tightening up, and the defense knows that they don't need to worry so much about the long bomb. Once it's up there in the air, it starts to get moved around a little bit with those crosswinds. And the gusts are what also are incredibly important. And in Green Bay today, it's supposed to be bad, and we've seen the total drop in Vegas, but it's so much worse in the Houston and Cleveland game, where the game opened around a 55-point total, looked like a smash spot for all things DFS, and that has dropped to 45.5 points across the betting lines today. And oh my gosh, like it takes me completely off all offensive weapons outside the running backs in that game. I did not like Duke Johnson specifically because of his ownership, and he's very volatile. We've seen him over 10 carries, I think, just 3 times over the last 3 years. Not really a spot I was wanting to be on him. But now, I mean, do they have to use him a lot? Does that mean that since the field is going to shrink a little bit, they're going to give him some more dump offs? Maybe that puts him back into play for me. I still got to decide how those lineups come together. I love what you guys were saying about Aaron Jones and the Green Bay rushing attack over there. Yes, that's going to make just the running back so much more important in a game like that where it's cold. It's going to be sustained winds. Crosswinds are going to be tough there in Lambeau. But I think the play, okay, Aaron Jones on DK 7.1K. Sure. Plug him in cash. I love Jamal Williams today. Listen, he's 4K. He's down there with Mike Davis at 4K as well. Jamal Williams, if this game is as bad as you think, and you're saying, I'm sorry, I'm worried about the wind, I can't play it. Come on. What does that mean? Green Bay is going to smash the rock today then, right? 40 times rushing, maybe 20 carries with Aaron Jones. We get a few A.J. Dillon touches, but Jamal Williams could get 4 or 5 catches out of the backfield, 10 carries. Will you take a 4K Jamal Williams in a smash spot against one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL in Jacksonville and say, Jamal Williams, go out there, give me 12 to 15 touches at 4K, give me a pivot off Mike Davis, which I don't recommend entirely, but that gives you an alternative play if you want one. I know that was long-winded. Sorry, man. I'm all jacked up.
No, it's good because we got a little schedule change, so we're going to get Mitch in the second half of the show. We got a lot to get. Gene, real quick, since we are talking about Houston and Cleveland, how ominous is it that David Johnson went to IR with a concussion?
Yeah, I haven't read that much about it in preparation for Sunday. That was sort of a known commodity, so I'll have a little bit more on that on Monday, but you don't like to see that. It's unusual, when we start to get to these situations where you almost wonder if it's an indefinite absence at this point. It suggests that he's probably got some ongoing symptoms and they're going to bring him back a little bit slowly. Is there something else going on? Hard to know, but it's not a good sign for the rest of the season, that's for sure.
Okay. We do have one of the less essential games from the second half of the slate, that San Francisco coming down here to New Orleans. Jason, what's your favorite Saint other than Alvin Kamara to play today?
Oh, Michael Thomas.
Okay, sorry. Other than Thomas and Kamara, anyone down ticket? A Murray, a Sanders, a Jared Cook, Drew Brees. I guess we didn't do the Brees versus Goff data.
No, it'd be Jared Cook, just because, again, get back to our diatribe about how rough the tight end situation is league wide. So Jared Cook, high range of potential outcomes like most tight ends this year, but we certainly know that he's capable of very big games. So yeah, Cook, I'd feel okay playing Cook this week given the situation at hand.
So when you put in the recipe together today, Mitch, are you putting something out of your Saints spice shaker? Which one are you going to shake in there?
Yeah. I mean, if you're plugging one in from the Saints today, it's Alvin Kamara. I think the leverage play potentially is just to use Michael Thomas, though. I mean, in that case, you're saying, Alvin Kamara just doesn't hit his scoring ceiling. He's going to be very high owned today because there's a lack of elite options to choose from at the running back position. So people are going to plug in Mike Davis, 4K, super cheap on DraftKings, and then they're going to go up the salary scale. Go plug in Alvin Kamara. Rather than taking 2 running backs that are 6K priced, going to be very volatile, you can go with nice high floor options in Kamara and Mike Davis. But because of that, the entire field is going to do that. So I think you can leverage that by using Michael Thomas at a very low owned rate, because everyone else is going to be all over the pass catching options in Arizona, in Buffalo, in Seattle, in Los Angeles. And in which case, Michael Thomas is going to be very low owned. And listen, we have not seen that bonkers game, but we know he's due and he's always has the talent for it. But if you're going to do that, you're inherently saying that this game, Michael Thomas, the Saints needed to throw the ball a ton. Alvin Kamara, for whatever reason, was scripted out of the game or taken away to some extent, and Michael Thomas catches 10 for 120 and 2 scores, well, they're probably going to be playing with 2-3 score lead, which means San Francisco is going to have to throw the ball on the opposite side. So I think the play is, if you use Michael Thomas today, you should be stacking him with somebody on the opposite side like Kendrick Bourne, Richie James, or Brandon Ayuk. And thank you very much. So you need to have that stack included with a guy like Michael Thomas, because you're saying if Michael Thomas is worth investing into, it's a shootout.
Yeah, and I love that, by the way, DFS, just the natural fact-finding research nature of DFS. I feel like this is the first year that it's become really widely accepted to say, well, if you expect this unit to have a good game, then you would expect someone on the other side as kind of a counterbalance. And we're not just putting together stacks from a team, but we're really putting together stacks from a game. And we're seeing those relationships between scoring and trying to put together those max lineups. All right. I gave Woodrow the once over on this one, Mitch. But for DFS, Jared Goff, is there the fear of missing out and you just go with the crowd or go with the trend here? Or is this one where you let the crowd go maybe over the cliff and you go another direction at quarterback in your DFS lineups?
Oh, man, what a great phrasing of that question. You're so good at that, Sig. That's like one of my favorite things every week, is the way you set me up, and I love it. So it is so hard for me to get away from Seattle and LA today. Seattle giving up 362 yards per game through the air. We are talking astronomical numbers. History on the wrong side of it as well for how poor of a pass defense they have been. Against quarterbacks, they're giving up 26 plus fantasy points per game. Against wide receivers, combined 37 plus. They're terrible. They're the worst at literally all three phases right there. Quarterbacks, wide receivers, and passing yards allowed. Of course, they all tie in together. Now, Jared Goff, highly volatile play. But the thing is, we've seen volatile players all year just go off against Seattle because it's Seattle's defense. They can't get a pass rush going. Their secondary stinks. There's literally nothing stopping them. The flip side of this also for me is the fact that Seattle is scoring at will. No one's really stopping them from scoring, which is forcing the other teams to have to throw the football to keep pace. And I think we're going to see something similar today. It's hard for me not to just plug them in. My ways to try to get lower exposure is including guys like David Moore on Seattle. Include him in your stack. Make it slightly unique compared to, oh, I love Russell Wilson, I'm going to plug him in with DK Metcalf. Yeah. Well, of course you are. Everybody loves Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf. Plug in Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, add David Moore. Maybe run it back on the other side with Josh Reynolds and Robert Woods instead of Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. You can find ways to be on chalk, but still remain unique in your lineup.
Yeah, I love that Josh Reynolds call. We're getting down to the buzzer here. Omar Santos in the chat room, Gene, wants to know, any worries about Allen Robinson?
I don't think so. There wasn't a lot of talk, and he's a player that usually gets listed questionable with relatively minor situations. I think he's probably good to go.
Woodrow, which Steelers wide receiver today?
Deontay, all day.
Yeah, he didn't get hurt last week. And if the wind keeps it short range,
it's like the old certainly. If not hurt in weekend, start in weekend +1.
Exactly. And we'll run it back. Parting shots for DFS, Mitch, a name, an angle, a strategy as we set our lineups for week 10.
Yeah, so it's going to be one of those weeks where Mike Davis, I'm just clicking that lock button, Sig. I'm not too worried about ownership and stuff. He's just kind of a free square. We saw him at 72% or higher snap rate in each one of his starts. I think we're going to get that again today. There's no reason why he wouldn't. The only thing that's really going to take him away from value in your lineups is going to be an injury. He scored 8 or more DraftKings points in all of those starts, and he had 3 games where he scored between 20 and 29. That's the type of range that I love out of like a 6K player. A 6.5K player, you're telling me he can score between 8 to 29 points. Okay, I'm plugging him in, right? Now I'm getting that at 4K. Yes, I'm going to lock him in. So let's just move that one aside. I'm not too worried about that. Outside of that, Jamal Williams, I really like this because of the weather right now. I think that nobody's really thinking about it that way. Aaron Jones, everyone's like, plug him in there. He's too cheap. Play him. Jamal Williams in the same game flow, potentially getting some extra carries because of the weather, I think is an interesting spot. I think that today I'm looking at players like David Moore, Josh Reynolds included in these highly chalky stacks to remain slightly unique. Same thing in Buffalo. It's John Brown, the lesser, or Cole Beasley, the lesser owned players off of Stephon Diggs. I want to be in the same games. They're great games for a reason. I'm just finding ways to try to remain unique within them. I think if you're getting off of these games completely, you need to be focusing on players like Justin Herbert. You need to stack up those types of games. You know, Darren Waller needs to be included. You're looking at Darren Waller and, Herbert, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams, a nice 4-man stack, something along those lines.
Yes, and we're always finding ways to remain unique. Again, learn from Mitch Carl, Rise or Fall, and learn from Dr. Gene, learn from Jason Wood, learn from the whole Football Guy staff. We love being part of your life. We love spending Sundays and otherwise the weekly roller coaster of fantasy football with you folks. Stay safe out there so we can keep getting together here every Sunday, and of course, like 8 times a week, the Audible, and so on and so forth. Everybody have a great week. Enjoy the full day of football, and always stay classy.